Well, it doesn't make any difference whether the elected body is large or small. Politicians just love to enact laws. Garfield Heights and Parma have now banned the animals in their cities, and Lakewood is studying legislation to do the same.
I mean, Lakewood has a nice name. It sounds good, Lakewood. You know, you got the lake, you know, you got the green, the trees. Oh, pretty nice name. No, that place is f***ed up.
Lakewood City Council is considering a ban on pit bull-type dogs tonight, and several public hearings are expected before a decision is made.
Again, I'm Brian Powers, and I propose this legislation, and I know for many of you, that makes me the enemy. What we're here to talk not about how much we love our dogs, but about whether this is a good piece of legislation for the city or not.
A man accused of running a dog fighting ring in Cleveland. There were 27 abused dogs at that house.
Quarantined because of yesterday's attack in East Toledo that involved a Toledo police officer.
Some of these pit bulls out here can be pretty nasty.
After a Lorain County man was attacked and killed by his dogs.
Like the victim of Tuesday's attack in Lorain County, Ken McCourt has taken in numerous dogs on his Doylestown farm, nearly all of which were abandoned or abused.
Dog bites are media events anymore. I mean, I got television people that call me right and left when there's a dog bite anywhere in Northeast Ohio to ask me what do I think happened, you know, and they're always looking for some sensational story. And when you dial it all in, you find out it was just an oops, or it was an accident, or it was miscommunication or something.
The news always seems to be about pit bulls. Now, is that because it's the most interesting story? No, I would think a more interesting story is if a dog involved in an attack is other than a pit bull. You'd much more likely to write about that. But there just aren't very many of those cases.
News is information that has a price tag on it, generally. You're paying for cable, you're paying for newspapers, you're paying for magazines. They have to sell those papers, those magazines, or get viewers. So when you have stories that are sensational, exciting, bloody, the more the merrier.
You're more likely to be killed by lightning, not just struck by lightning, killed by lightning than you are to be killed by a dog. A child is more likely to die because of a 25-gallon mop bucket than he's likely to be killed by a dog, let alone taking dogs and then finding a breed of dog. How unbelievably unlikely it is that you will ever be killed by a dog. And yet, if you turn on the news, you don't hear about the menace of motor vehicles. You don't hear about the menace of tractors. You hear about dogs. Because it's so fantastically rare and it pushes buttons, it gets play. And that media play gives us the impression that it's rather common, when in fact, it's getting media play because it's so rare.
One of the things that we're now seeing is that there's been more analysis of some of the media reports on pit bulls. We found that there's actually been a lot of misreporting on dog attacks and whether a pit bull is actually involved, if you still want to call it a pit bull. And the other issue we're finding is that media attention, if there is an attack by a dog that's deemed to be a pit bull, is much greater than if another dog breed is involved.
The news anchors and the news reporters who are responsible for reporting on dog bites are no more or less educated than the average person about pit bulls, which is typically they know very little about them.
This is a study by the National Canine Research Council, and it talks about the media bias in reporting dog bites. On August 18th of 2007, a Labrador attacked a 70-year-old man, sending him to the hospital in critical condition. The dog had to be shot after charging police officers who later arrived at the scene. This incident was reported in one article only in the local newspaper. The next day, a 16-month-old child received fatal injuries to the head and neck after being attacked by a mixed-breed non-pit bull dog. This attack was reported 2 times in a local newspaper. The next day, a 6-year-old boy hospitalized after having his ear torn off and receiving severe bites to his head by a non-pit bull mixed breed dog. Again, this attack was reported in one article in one newspaper. Then the following day, a 59-year-old woman was attacked in her home by 2 pit bulls and hospitalized with severe injuries. That incident was reported in over 230 articles in national and international newspapers, as well as major TV stations including CNN, Fox, and MSNBC.
We are bombarded with visual graphic images of people being in situations where they have been exposed to a fear-invoking stimulus. It is very easy for those of us who are not even involved in the direct attack to vicariously experience the fear. We ourselves can now interpret that same situation with a fear response of our own. So the influence from the media is extraordinary.
State agents say these 2 men were responsible for an illegal dogfight Saturday in Robeson County. Spectators came from as far away as Ohio and Maryland.
5 adults and 1 juvenile are in custody.
There were gambling monies that were involved. There were narcotics involved.
Also the presence of a toddler who was allowed to watch.
Underground dogfights, endangering animals.
Even a treadmill for dogs, all seized from this Dayton home.
Police found a bloody chainsaw and mutilated dog parts.
In another story tonight that a lot of people are certainly talking about, pit bull activists claim that their First Amendment rights have been trampled. City of Lakewood officials say that they're just doing their job.
We are a compact community with small yards, families close together, thousands of dogs, thousands of school-aged kids riding bikes and playing in their neighborhoods, and senior citizens walking on the streets. In tough economic times with $4 a gallon gasoline, what we're seeking to do here is make our community even more walkable, even more safe, more clean, more family friendly, so that more families choose and stay in Lakewood. So we must determine the dog safety standard that fits our own unique characteristics and not adopt a standard created for other communities with other characteristics.
I have many concerns with this ban, but I would like to address one specifically. 2 years ago, I took in a foster dog. She came to me very ill in need of a large amount of medical attention. The rescue that I was working with posted her on their site as a boxer bulldog, because that's what they believed it was. The vet at the clinic labeled her an American Staffordshire Terrier boxer mix. She was seen by 2 different vets at the clinic, and they could not agree on what breed she was at this local Lakewood clinic. She later had an allergic reaction and had to be rushed to the emergency clinic, where they laughed at the idea that she was a pit bull or had any pit in her at all. This time the vet labeled her a Shar-Pei boxer mix. She was later adopted out into a loving home. If 4 of them cannot determine what my dog is, then I want to know what the qualifications of these people are, because they could determine all these dogs 100% of the time.
I feel that a lot of us shouldn't even have to be speaking on this. We can waste our time on other things, to where other safety issues in the city, such as 70+ sex offenders that live. Right here, if you want, you can have it. I have a whole entire list. There are more Tier 3 sexual offenders on here than there's been dog fights in Lakewood in the past 15 years.
You have to understand from our perspective, when we receive complaints about the perception of public safety declining, it can be that there are folks who see pit bulls, and while they don't tell the owners that they're scared of that dog, while they don't call the animal control officer, they do instantly make a decision that the safety in their city is declining. So I think this is a somewhat targeted response to that. I'm not suggesting it's the right one as it's written. But what I'm saying is, when you say that there's no problem because that bull hasn't bitten someone or hasn't acted dangerously, I don't think that's necessarily accurate. I think there are a lot of folks out there who see a dog and make that decision. Frankly, there are a lot of folks out there who see a certain type of person and make that decision. And that may not be fair. And it may not be fair. It may not be fair. What I'm suggesting, though, is that we are doing everything we can not only to actually create safety, but also to create the perception of safety.
A Lakewood councilman introduced this latest legislation after an increase in complaints by citizens.
We had a man attacked pretty seriously, and we had to impound 16 of these dogs in the first quarter of the year alone. And that's the winter months. We usually don't have a lot of activity.
Well, did a local councilman sick the dogs on pit bull activists?
This was July. They came in July. Well, this is the original notice door flyer / piece of toilet paper.
I refuse to give my numerical address due to the fact I was harassed pretty much by police officers.
Mr. Brown, are you a Lakewood resident?
Yes, I am. I live on Wyandotte. I live on Wyandotte, that's all I'll say. I felt like I was targeted after the first meeting because I spoke out.
You weren't targeted. Let's interject that right now. I want to clarify that for the record. That's not something that law enforcement does. Okay, that's not something law enforcement.
Hidden cameras caught a slightly different explanation when pit bull activist Christy Howdy
Hi, are you Mike Stewart? I thought so.
questioned Lakewood Animal Control Officer Mike Stewart.
It was brought to our attention through an email that certain people made statements regarding owning pit bulls. Do we have files on them? And if not, check up on it.
After testifying against Lakewood's proposed pit bull ban, Jason Brown was paid a visit.
This guy wanted to know what I did for a living. He wanted to know, if there's kids in my house. I feel like, truthfully, that's really none of his business.
4 of the individuals who spoke out against breed-specific legislation and spoke out against the ban at the first hearing were all of a sudden visited by animal control just 4 days later, never having had a complaint in the past about their dogs, and the complainant's name was Lakewood City Council.
I cannot speak for everyone on council, but I'm certain that at least the 4 folks here, and I'm relatively certain the other 3, that no one on city council asked our animal control officers to approach any of the folks that stood up at that meeting.
The I-Team's now obtained that email, sent to Human Service Director Dottie Buchan on May 22nd. Dottie, can the animal control officers confirm that each of these residents comply with current law? I'm not sure we want them banging on doors yet to demand compliance, but I'd be interested to know who is and who is not being a responsible owner and a good citizen.
Clearly, you asked them to investigate. Clearly, I asked their director, their boss's boss, to let me know the information.
I do actually.
I'm not finished. Let me have my 3 minutes in this here.
You're in 6 minutes here.
Yeah.
You're in 6 minutes here.
I would just end by saying, at this point, all I have are the fact that there were 4 reports, never having been complained before. These people were visited by animal control 4 days after speaking out, and the complainant was listed as Lakewood City Council. Be that as it may. And I don't want to accuse anybody here, but I believe that if you were targeting these citizens, your actions they constitute governmental retaliation based on the exercise of the First Amendment rights of your citizens, your constituents, and people you claim to care about. They verge on abusive process and abuse of your positions as government officials, and if that is in fact the case, then shame on you.
Danny Howdy, I'm a resident of Lakewood for 7 years, current resident of Avon Lake. My wife talked to you about some of the statistics that she found in the Lakewood public records, and I want to expand on that a little further. The statistics that she found over 10 years showed that of the bites in Lakewood, pit bulls accounted for less than 3% of those bites. Less than 3%. It is a fairly agreed upon statistic that, give or take a few percent, 50% of bites occur on a dog owner's property. Meaning, if someone comes on the property, that's where the problem happens. It's not at the park it's not walking down the street, it's on the owner's property about half of the time. It's also a fairly agreed upon figure that about 75% of the victims of a bite from a pit bull or pit bull type are owners or family members of the owners. If you factor those into the statistics, any Lakewood resident who is not an owner of a pit bull and doesn't go onto the property of a pit bull owner has a 0.375% chance, less than 0.5% chance of having any run-in with a pit bull. So what that means is, if you all pass this legislation, you're solving less than 0.5% of the problem, and you are not addressing in any way, shape, or form 99.65% of the problem. Now, I don't know what kind of job anyone can have on earth where they are assigned a task and fail to address 99.65% of that task. Now, if I go out and I lose 99.6% of my cases, I get fired. If my accountant misses 99.6% of my tax deductions, they get fired. And ladies and gentlemen, with this sham of the legislation here, you are missing 99.65% of the problem.
Mr. Hadley, we're at 3 minutes, so if you could bring it to a close, please.
I cannot think of very many bad things that can happen to a human being that have less likelihood than 0.375 chance, other than perhaps getting gored by a unicorn.
I was pretty confident that if we got rid of all pit bulls, that would be a good thing and not a bad thing. Bob Hickey, I was in 1987, a state representative from the 39th House District in Dayton. Well, my role was reasonably innocent, just trying to do a job in a local organization, actually based on some statewide discussions, decided it was time to firm up definitions for dangerous and vicious dogs.
Representative Hickey was an outstanding legislator, and so his bill obviously had been vetted in the House. My name is Neil Zimmers, Nealzimmers. I was state senator in 1987 and assistant minority leader. My role in the so-called pit bull controversy was to prepare a Senate amendment.
I think Senator Zimmers would say that he already had in mind that they should go after pit bulls. Local communities were doing the same thing, and it was picking up some momentum. Certainly the question came up, if you want to get any dog that's ever killed someone, there would be a lot of breeds, and I agree that that's true. With a pit bull, you can look at it and know that you don't have a Mastiff and you don't have an American Bulldog.
Personally, couldn't describe to you what a pit bull is. I don't even know if I can. I think I know them if I see them, but that'd be the extent of it. But we do know that pit bulls, generally, as the term is defined, pit bulls, were bred to fight, and they have a genetic predisposition to attack. Now, not all pit bulls do that, and they go through their lives without attacking anybody. And a lot of it is a problem with the owners of pit bulls. The owners at the time, in 1987, it was a problem in Ohio. They were basically a weapon of choice for a lot of nefarious characters, drug dealers and others. They were causing a great deal of mayhem in the communities. We had testimony from police departments, from humane departments in basically urban areas, the inner city urban areas where you see a lot of pit bulls, and often they're the lower income areas.
I had no idea. In fact, it wasn't my intent to begin with to go specifically after pit bulls. It seemed to be kind of a national story at that time, and pretty much everybody knew we needed to tighten the definitions, something that could be prosecuted. So by the time it was introduced and then referred to a committee, right after that, the sponsor, John Shivers, from the Salem area. Called and said, "You want a hearing?" And I said, "Sure." And right before the first hearing on the House bill, this physician in Dayton was mauled to death, and the very next day it had been scheduled for sponsored testimony.
A doctor had been leaving the house of apparently ill repute at the time, from what we understand, was attacked by 2 pit bulls as he was leaving that house that would belong to the owner.
The first call came in from a woman that apparently the doctor had been visiting. The supposed owner of the most violent dog came and called him off and grabbed the dog and threw him back into the yard. They rushed the doctor to the hospital and he died in surgery. Everything changed after that. The lights went on, the cameras went on.
Almost contemporaneous with the doctor being killed, a young girl here in Columbus was bitten severely on the face, was mauled by a pit bull that belonged to her next door neighbor.
It was the timing. If that had happened in the summer when we were out of session, perhaps everything would have calmed down by the time we started a serious debate. As it turned out, it happened just the very day before this bill was going to have its first hearing.
The legislature tries to do what it can to help protect the people. So we just felt that this amendment was very germane to the Vicious Dog Act, so we would include it in his bill when it came to the Senate.
There were people who signed on to co-sponsor the bill before there was any designation of pit bulls in it, just the the general definition of dangerous and vicious. There were folks who signed on as co-sponsors when the designation was added or when the issue became hot. They pulled off as co-sponsors and voted against the bill. Some of them didn't like the designation. What we did was to designate them as vicious, which had much more severe consequences.
When we look at the laws relating to pit bulls, the ordinances that might restrict pit bulls, usually it tries to define it very broadly. States and local jurisdictions are given a lot of deference to pass laws related to the health and safety of their citizens. The judicial review of such laws is based on a very low standard. The standard is just there has to be some rational basis for the law. So because of that, breed discriminatory laws are generally upheld on constitutional grounds if they're appropriately drafted, meaning they just can't be too vague or applied in a discriminatory manner. When we say discriminatory manner, we don't mean discriminating against the particular dogs, we mean discriminating against a protected class. Dog owners are not a protected class.
By having a breed singled out, it makes it easier to require someone who's known to have a vicious animal. If local authorities want to go after that person before there's ever bad activity, they can do so.
If it has saved one life, if it has saved a young child from terrible facial injuries, then the legislation has done its job.
Now that we've had a lot of years and many prosecutions, they've been able to pick and choose based on what they think a pit bull is. And my guess is that a prosecutor wouldn't touch a case if he thought there was going to be difficulty proving that it was a pit bull just by looking at it or just by picture.
We've sort of developed a habit now going forward that if we regulate a group of dogs, if we stamp on that group of dogs, that somehow is addressing the issue. It doesn't. There is no evidence from anywhere in the world that regulating dogs on the basis of breed makes a community safer. There simply isn't any. But nevertheless, this legacy of doing it in this way persists. So you have an incident or maybe something very minor. You have a clamor for something to happen now, but that feel-good one-off can kind of capture the public imagination.
The pit bull ordinance in Toledo has been a miserable failure I mean, it is a shining example of breed discrimination at its finest. We have focused every penny of our resources on rounding up all the big blocky-headed dogs with short fur and saying, oh, okay, if we round all these guys up, we kill them all, we're going to be safe.
Ever since grew up here, I remember the focus on pit bulls for whatever reason. I think a lot of that was frankly driven by Tom Skeldon.
3 years ago, it was 1,354 pit bulls, and then it went to 1,281, and then last year I think it was 1,081.
I mean, I've looked at numbers like 3 years back. To extrapolate that over 20-some years, I would say you're looking at, it's clearly in the thousands.
Now, how can that be possible when we're only really talking about, 3 breeds? It's not possible. We don't have a lot of Staffordshire Bull Terriers in Lucas County. There are very few of them. There are not a lot of American Staffordshire Terriers in Lucas County, purebred. We have a ton of what he would call pit bulls, and all of them are nothing but mixes.
Yeah, this wasn't just like he really hated pit bulls, but he was like a real dog lover when it came to every dog. He was killing litters of puppies that weren't even close to being pit bulls. I mean, like the whole litter they would kill. They'd give them 10 days or whatever was required by law, and they'd just kill 7 or 8 puppies, non-pit bull puppies. And Tom was really focused on killing pit bulls, so that gives you a sense of how much effort he put into the pit bull side.
When I did my public records request, one of the things I asked for was the training records of the staff. There has never been breed identification training done at the Lucas County Dog Pound. The former dog warden had no training in breed identification.
A large portion of those were killed just because someone made an evaluation based on very flimsy science, if any science, that these dogs were quote-unquote pit bulls. We're lucky to have a newspaper in the city, the Toledo Blade, who took a very thorough interest in the subject, and I think really did their research and put some really compelling stories together and made a good case to the public.
The dog warden killed, I believe it was a litter of 10 puppies that were brought in by an individual in Toledo Central City, and he kept one for himself. And lo and behold, about 1.5 years later, this dog grew up to a beautiful, I think it was a shepherd, and the most loving thing imaginable. But the puppies were labeled as pit bull. And the policy of the dog warden's office, which really made Lucas County stand a bit apart, was that our dog warden refused to cooperate with any rescue groups that were not all breed rescue groups or general rescue groups and we realized that there were some practices there that are questionable. There was a report that came out by a new oversight committee that was formed to examine the dog warden's office, and the report says that for the most part, the Lucas County, the dog warden here was killing too many dogs, not adopting enough out. And some of these dogs, I mean, they might have had a boxy head, but a breeder would not consider them pit bulls, but they just happen to be that way.
But upon a review of the impound records, you can clearly see where the majority of dogs that are listed as pit bulls, are as small as 30 pounds all the way up to 120.
The Toledo Humane Society has repeatedly, in public, to me, to Mr. Skeldon, offered to take every adoptable dog, not just puppies, every adoptable dog. And they have a broad definition of what an adoptable dog is. They have offered to come to the pound on a daily basis and take the dogs. Citizens are paying the most for the least amount of service.
I had told J.C. Rendell about it months before it came out, and he did not believe it. And he made a couple calls to the city, and see, they just kind of like, well, we have this contract, and we do this, and we do that, and they just won't do it, they won't do it. Finally, Carol Dunn on Lucas County Dog Warden Advisory Board flat out emailed and said, this is the question I want answered. Do you pay the dog pound $100 for every pit bull citation that's written? And the answer that came back wasn't a yes or a no. It was a big fluffy paragraph about we have a contract, and then she sent back, do you pay?
Yes or no.
Exactly. And then it was yes.
And we had the highest license fee in the state. We also had the highest rate of compliance in the state. Therefore, we never had to dip into the general fund, and we have left them in the black, in the six figures in the black.
And that's basically what the city was doing, was saying, sure, every citation you write under the pit bull ordinance, we're going to give you $100, and at the same time, you get to pick which dogs you call pit bulls. How ridiculous is that? No one really understood that that $100 was coming out of their pocket and being given to the dog pound.
He says keeping the public safe was his first and foremost priority, and that the relationships built and maintained with local police, sheriff departments, and other organizations enabled his office to do an excellent job doing that.
If you're going to run a department in this community and do it well, you need to network with all these other assets in town. The Toledo Police Department was our biggest asset. Okay, and we networked with them and had to network with them on a daily basis.
He was very good at using the media to drive this as well. He would, on the way to the call the media and have them meet him there, and there would be a big story about it. And so that, that drives perception, that drives fear.
It was my belief that we could maximize our efforts by banging the drum loudly, and we did.
The statistics are terrible. We have one of the highest, if not the highest, euthanasia rates in the state. He had promised to do 4, 5, 6 different things along the way, promote spay and neutering, start a dog park, those things. He hasn't done them. There's cause for termination. I mean, he has not done as good of a job as he ought to do as dog ward.
But in a community where you've got a strong media form of government, you end up with people in office who will succumb to that kind of pressure.
First at 4, after waves of criticism, Lucas County dog warden Tom Skeldon has had enough. The longtime warden announced his retirement today.
He told me over the phone this afternoon that he chose to retire now for the good of the community.
Skeldon sent a letter to the president of the commissioners this morning saying he will leave his post effective next January.
But I thought leaving would maybe take the pressure off our department, and the paper would move on to some other target or something. No.
And in the end, what did the city accomplish? The city of Toledo spent over $1 million defending that ridiculous ordinance, and they forced several families, tax-paying, job-holding families, to move out of Ohio and into Michigan, and they killed a couple of nice dogs. That was a success story.
There was frankly a very committed core of animal lovers in Toledo.
I just kept showing up at the meetings, and I just kept saying, you have to read this information. And once he engaged in the dialogue, that was it. He was done, because he was like, there's no rhyme nor reason to this. How could you rehabilitate the Michael Vick dogs into therapy dogs, but yet in the city of Toledo all the pit bulls are vicious? These two things just do not jive together.
Rob Brzezinski joins us live with the very latest now. And Rob, this proposal is crafted by the Lucas County Dog Warden Advisory Committee.
Met a lot of resistance from my 2 colleagues, one of whom, by the way, is a first cousin of Tom Skeldon. And now we have a policy in place that actually has some framework.
Rather, it defines dangerous dogs based on behavior and imposes fines on reckless dog owners.
Now we can truly make strides in adopting out dogs, dramatically lowering our euthanasia rates, and begin to erase the black eye that our county has received because of the treatment of dogs by this government.
I don't think there's anyone in the state of Ohio, legislators or anyone else, who would say that all pit bulls are vicious. It is simply a factually untrue statement. And it is quite unfortunate that the state of Ohio decided to put its stamp of approval on a universally recognized incorrect statement.
As new councils come and go, eventually there are people who think we ought to change that, and there have been some lawmakers who have tried to change it as well, and there's an effort going on right now. I haven't heard the testimony.
Amendments in order. Lady may proceed.
I first introduced House Bill 79 in the 128th General Assembly, which would have been 2009. And we got it through committee fairly well. Then House Bill 55 came up, which was the animal cruelty bill. We then tried to just amend House Bill 79 into House Bill 55.
Today, I ask for your support in taking another large step forward.
Since 1987, Ohio has statutorily classified a certain breed of dog to be vicious. If we accept this amendment, dogs of all breeds, including pit bulls, can and will still be considered vicious or dangerous if they demonstrate these propensities.
The chair recognizes Representative Dominic.
Well, for 4 terms, I've listened to the testimony. Last term, I thought for sure Representative Webster, when he brought his pit bull, that vicious pit bull, to committee, that we would convince some legislators who I believe were not as smart as the pit bull. It was a docile, wonderful, intelligent animal that I fell in love with. That vicious pit bull who was going to kill me. Webster would have killed me before the pit bull.
Barb is cautiously optimistic. 55 is an excellent bill. 79 is an excellent bill. Combined, you know, what can you possibly say to oppose either of them?
Question is, shall the bill as amended pass? The House will prepare and proceed to vote. Clerk will take the roll. 93 yeas, 3 nays. Therefore, having received the required constitutional majority, the bill is hereby passed and entitled.
After we got it out of the House and we moved it over to the Senate, you know, in talking with some of the senators over there, I felt like it might go somewhere. So I was kind of excited about maybe being able to finally clean this up. But it came fairly apparent that there were other agendas and other priorities on the Senate side, and it wasn't going to go anywhere.
So it's your contention to this day.
Correct.
To this day, pit bulls are inherently dangerous.
Yes. And when I say that, there's a lot of them that are never going to bite anybody, okay? But you don't know which ones those are going to be.
We had just the other day, this is a pit bull where the woman said the dog had never attacked her children and jumped in and almost killed the boy next door. The neighbor across the street had to come stick a knife in the dog to release the jaws. This predisposition to attack. Now, perhaps that dog had never, I'm assuming that the dog had never attacked anybody before. I don't know whether I'm right in that assumption or not, but it did then.
The big thing that people need to understand is that dogs just don't flip out and nail somebody. You know, there's aggression, just like in humans, starts out at a very low level, and it's on a continuum. It grows or it dissipates, depending on the threat level and how the animal feels. When I hear the term unprovoked attack, most of the time that means the person who's telling me the story doesn't know why the animal did it.
I think there are some people who would use the phrase unprovoked attacks. However, I would not. I'm much more into behavioral determinism insofar as there's either going to be some normal fight, flight, competitive type of context, or there's going to be perhaps some organic pathology, but behavior's never just going to happen completely out of the blue. It's always explainable.
Since recorded time in the United States, we lose about 20 people every year to, fatal attacks by dogs. That number hasn't changed in 200 years, okay? What changes is what breed does it, okay? And what changes on that is what breed happens to be popular.
For as long as records have been kept, there have been between 12 and 20 to 25 dog-related fatalities in the U.S. every year. For as long as numbers have been kept. At the same time as those numbers have been kept, the human population has grown, the dog population has grown, and the degree of compression of dogs and people into close quarters because of urbanization and so on has increased, which then the only tenable conclusion is that, in fact, dogs are, fantastically safe.
I'm not going to give you a bunch of statistics, but we investigate the serious dog bites for the health department. The second breed that's most involved in dog bites last year were Labrador Retriever and Labrador Retriever mixes. There were 35 serious dog bites, okay? The third was German Shepherds. There were 28, okay? There were 81 serious dog bites by pit bulls.
I think there could be several reasons why pit bulls tend to be, hogging the headlines when it comes to dog attacks. Part of it could be the misconceptions about what actually is a pit bull.
Initially, they were referring to American Pit Bull Terriers. Then that group expanded to include the American Staffordshire Terrier and the Staffordshire Bull Terrier. Then it expanded to include dogs that look like that. So the term keeps morphing, it keeps getting bigger, and the group of dogs that people want to regulate keeps getting larger. Sometimes whether or not there are even any dogs in those towns, it's just something they read in the paper. The habit of demonizing a group of dogs, of vilifying a group of dogs, is a justification for a kind of cruelty which can spill over to all dogs. It affects our attitude towards all dogs.
Basically today it's a witch hunt regarding the American Pit Bull Terrier. In years past, when I was growing up, it was a witch hunt regarding German Shepherds.
What breed isn't on the banned list? Actually, it's amazing if you start looking at city ordinances, how many cities have just started a laundry list of breeds.
It tears friendly dogs out of their home and basically results in their death. It's a tragedy that's being carried out throughout small towns in the United States, and it's simply un-American.
We don't lock up offenders before they've offended, on the basis of some demographic class. I mean, do people really think about this?
Forget communism in the 50s, all right? Un-American activity is trying to outlaw any one breed or two breeds of dog in America. I think you couldn't ask for a less patriotic type of legislation or a less American thing to do. In World War I, the pit bull was the symbol of America. There was a famous propaganda poster that had several different breeds, and in the middle was a white pit bull with Old Glory draped around his shoulders. And the legend of the poster said, "I'm neutral, but not afraid of any of them." And that has always been an American position, if you will, politically and in terms of global relations. So how we can ever even dream of going from having this dog, this noble creature, stand in for us and represent us as Americans, to outlawing him out of existence is beyond me.
One of the things about breed-specific legislation, the breed-specific laws, I actually call them breed discriminatory laws because it's more applicable, is that sometimes we see that they're adopted with very little scientific evidence, or the scientific evidence that's used to support the law is old.
I think that's the difference between any dog, any breed of dog is different just based on how it was bred and for what purposes it was bred. That's the difference here of these dogs is in their breeding and their DNA.
We know by looking at even purebred dogs, even Westminster champions and what have you, that when you look at the mitochondrial DNA, there's a whole bunch of other animals in there besides the kind of breed that animal is supposed to be.
If you were presented with a pit bull right now and you just looked at him, it would be really impossible to say how much contribution there is from those various different gene pools. The dog genome is an incredibly elastic affair if you think about it. With no other species of animal have we been able to obtain, Great Danes and Chihuahuas and Commodores and Maltese and Afghans and Pugs and Shar-Peis and so on.
If you go to a dog show and you look at a whole bunch of border collies there, they should be able to move sheep. And if something runs past that ring, every one of them should turn and look. Half of them should be at the end at least trying to go. But what is interesting about those dogs is those motor patterns. A motor pattern is a sequences of behaviors that the animal is born with. Okay, the motor pattern that most behaviorists believe dogs were evolved from was hunting. Okay, and if you look at the hunting pattern of a wild canine like a wolf, there are sequences in the hunting display. The first one is called orientation, it's over there. And then it comes to eye stalk, and then they approach the game and they test it, usually move it into critical distance. The animal is either going to fight or run. If it runs, then you get chase, and you get something called grab bite, which they'll grab a part of the animal, tackle them, take them down. With dogs, it's render, so they pull them apart, they rip them apart, and then it's devour, eat them, okay, if they're hungry. And then it's retrieve, which means they're going to take the carcass either in their stomach or drag it back to a rendezvous point and feed the youngsters. What we did as humans is we got the dogs to specialize. We decided that we needed animals to help us hunt, so we got them to point and show us where it is. We had other ones that would, once you shot them, they would bring it back. we decided that we could use dogs to help us keep sheep in a group, okay? Or move cows through the pasture, whatever. So an animal that does chase but doesn't do grab bite is what you want.
Genetics do influence behavior. It's patently clear. But I think we start to dislike that idea when it doesn't serve our purposes. And I think a lot of people, very well-meaning people on the political left, I mean, I'm as left-leaning as there is probably on this planet, but there's no way around the fact that genetics influence behavior. Does it mean that therefore, you know, we should lock people up who have certain, no. Does it mean that we should have breed-specific legislation? Of course not. You know, those are not, I think that we don't need to bend reality in order to do the right thing here.
I think it was Staffordshire Terrier Club or something like that, American Staffordshire Terrier Club, was brought a bunch of pit bulls to the General Assembly, to the Senate, and the General Assembly the day the vote in the Senate was to take place. And of course the offices, the secretaries and the aides and the offices were all keeping their doors shut because they were afraid of these dogs. I mean, you knew what was going on in Ohio at that time with pit bull attacks. And so they said, well, these dogs are docile, and we don't have a problem with these dogs. And the public television announcer, George Zimmerman, was interviewing outside of the State House, interviewing the owner of the dog and the leader of the group. And he put his microphone to get a comment from the owner of the dog, and the pit bull jumped up and bit his microphone.
A dog who comes in and snaps and backs off is a dog who's like drawing a line. He's saying this close and no closer. Okay, they didn't miss. You didn't get away in the nick of time. You're not that fast. Animals always start off trying to get out of the problem. Okay, those are called, the technical term are cutoff signals. Okay, they're also called calming signals. They're called displacement behaviors. They have a lot of different names depending on what science and what group you're talking to. But they're usually something that the animal's doing to try to avoid the problem. That's everything from a dog like leaning away. If I reach to pet a dog and they lean away, that's a cutoff signal. The animal's trying to tell me they don't want me to touch them. Okay? Looking away, tongue flicks, there's a whole bunch of them that dogs use. Okay? If that level of aggression, and that's an aggressive behavior, okay? If that level of aggression doesn't work, then they escalate. Okay, and the next level might be alarm, bark, and growl. You know, and this is the animal's way of saying, boy, this is really scaring me. I don't like this, okay? Now, if I punish the dog, don't you growl at me. I'm not solving the problem. I'm telling them I don't want the warning system. Okay, you're actually eliminating the warning system, so now the animal goes from cutoff signal to the next level, whatever that happens to be for the animal. And that's usually whatever works for them. Okay, so if alarm, bark, and growl doesn't work, they'll snap and lunge. You know, and I see it all the time that the dog lunged and snapped and didn't touch anybody. And usually the client tells me the dog missed. Well, let me tell you, it is extremely rare that a dog misses. They are so fast. Their flicker rate in their eyes are faster than ours. We move in slow motion to them. Now, if a snap and lunge does not solve the problem, then they escalate to the next level, which could be what I call a contact bite. There's several ways they can do this. They can muzzle punch you. They hit you with their mouth. They literally close their mouth and punch you with their teeth. Usually it leaves a bruise. Sometimes they'll nail you with an open mouth and then drag their teeth on you as they come off, and then will leave scratches and a bruise. Sometimes they'll hit you and come off and tear the clothing. And they didn't miss. If they wanted your skin, they'd have got it. They were just tearing, they're issuing a warning. It's a higher warning than a growl, but it's still a warning. Okay, now if that doesn't work, they might actually start putting pressure in here, a puncture or laceration. But that graduated bite is really, really important because dogs don't go to a level 5 bite if a cutoff signal works. You know, if you can tell somebody, stop, don't come any closer, and they do, there's no reason to own a gun.
If you look at breed standards and you talk to dog people, you know, there are a number of breeds which are inclined to be very good with people that are familiar to them and fight flighty or more difficult to socialize to strangers. Now, as it happens, pit bulls don't happen to be in that category. They're a breed that are, generally speaking, both friendly to familiar people and gregarious with unfamiliar people.
I want to comment one thing on the substance there. The key factor is damage done by bites. Certainly there are dog bites from all kinds of breeds. What we're zeroing in on is
maiming and killings and severe damage.
The structure of their face, whether they have a pointed nose or a broad nose, is not going to really change the damage they do. It'll change the bite pattern. There's no dog out there whose jaws lock. You know, there's no hinging mechanism in any breed of dog that's any different from any other dog as far as the bone structure of their face goes. But when they say the dog locks on and won't let go, that's an emotional event, not a physical factor.
But that is far different from this kind of sensational notion of a dog's jaws sort of, becoming this vice-like grip. It's just not true. I think that's, trying to promote sensationalism. I don't think it's helpful.
Hey, with Children's Hospital, we had a lot of news media there, especially in the beginning of the program, because it was kids and animals. It's good filler, for news programs and things like that. But my God, if one of those dogs ever bit one of those kids, you better believe every news company in North America would be down there. But that's not what they're doing. We got 70-some teams in the hospital, right now. And there's dogs in the hospital 7 days a week. We've been doing it for almost 20 years now, since nobody's been bit. It's not a big media event.
This is how we all met Callie the pit bull. She'd been viciously beaten by her owner. Her back leg had been shattered. Fast forward to today, this is Callie, although her name now is Abby.
Abby is 22 months old. She goes into an assisted living facility with older people. So she had to learn you don't jump on people. You certainly don't jump up on a wheelchair. In an assisted living facility, you have wheelchairs, you have walkers, you have canes. You have people who are older, not necessarily, real steady in their gait. And oftentimes, what she will do is we go and we visit with these residents, and she'll go and lay on their feet. And they are very proud. The fact that she's a pit bull, they brag to anybody that comes in. They'll say, "This is Abby. She's a pit bull and she is not vicious." Abby has been through several obedience regimens, the basic obedience, the intermediate, the advanced. She has her canine good citizen certification, and she also, most recently in January, received her certification to be a therapy dog. Oftentimes what we see when we take her out as people, they'll come up and they pet her and they tell us how cute she is and how sweet she is and how loving she is, and they'll say, "What kind of a dog is that?" And as soon as we say she's a pit bull, they want to back up and they all of a sudden want to become afraid. And we always just tell them, "Look, you were just petting her, she was just licking you, look how sweet she is."
My neighbor and I were walking our dogs last summer, and at the end of our street, there is one house where they don't believe in leashing their dog. And he will run up around our neighborhood without the dog on a leash. And she had to, her dogs are almost 100 pounds at the time, and I had Baxter, and the dog was running towards us down the street. And we were actually across the street. And I asked him if he would mind coming to get his dog. And he started yelling and screaming at me, telling me that he wasn't the one that had the vicious dog. That's how it is sometimes when you have a dog that people think that could be a pit bull or maybe look like a pit bull. That's how you get treated sometimes. And when we were trying to find a dog, when we were looking on Pet Finder, they all had sad stories, but Baxter, I kept reading his story over because there was this woman that was walking her dog and she saw him barking out of the top floor of a vacant house. I started my day December 7th, 2006, with heaviness and dread in my heart. To my horror, I was told that the dog was classified as pit and not adoptable. I listened to my voicemail messages. There was a beautiful woman's gentle voice and kind words. "This is Shauna Klein for the love of pits. I want to help, call me."
Many shelters are using the law as an excuse to not adopt them out. Our insurance companies are using the laws as an excuse to, to not cover these dogs for no reason. No good reason. These dogs aren't guarding dogs. They're not protection dogs. They're dogs that just absolutely love people.
Finally, Shauna was to go to the city kennels December 8th to temperament test and hopefully rescue the beautiful black dog. It was almost 3 p.m., closing time for the city kennels. I went back to my office, the phone rang. It was Shauna. I could hear her soft, reassuring, kind, calm words. I am in my car and the pooch's head is in my lap.
I started very young. By the time I could walk, if there were stray cats, I snuck them in my house. And I was extremely allergic to cats, so that was a big problem for my parents. Throughout college, kids would get dogs and then they would just throw them out at the end of the year because they were going home. So that's where, I would just kind of help dogs when they were needed. And then when I started my career, I wanted to be involved with dogs, so I got involved with local rescues and then found out that they were killing all the pit bulls and decided that I was going to go elsewhere to do some good work. I couldn't support a shelter that was turning their back on dogs that need them the most. Preston was brought in at the time. While he was in the rescue, he went through probably about 3 classes, and they give certificates at the end of the classes. And he also actually achieved the Canine Good Citizen, which is an AKC certificate.
Anybody ever teach you to close your mouth while you chew?
When I first met Preston, I felt that he was probably the friendliest dog I've ever met that didn't really know me.
Preston is everything that we would want a pit bull, or any dog actually, to be.
I found a dog that pretty much changed my life.
He can get wound up. When he gets excited, he does the zoomies, but he tucks his butt in and runs back and forth.
Meeting Preston really forced me to understand these dogs better and understand what an ex-fighting dog really meant.
If you didn't know what his, that he'd come from a past like that, you would never even suspect it.
He was scarred up, missing hair.
And there was evidence that he had been fought.
And on a Friday at about 2 o'clock, I got a phone call that they were euthanizing Preston at 4. I know I can't save them all, but I was saving him.
I had never met a quote-unquote fighting dog.
This supposedly very vicious dog who is one of the sweetest dogs I've ever met.
Preston can teach a lot of people about these dogs.
Preston is the center of Jeff's world.
And he's passing out. When Lakewood proposed the ban, it became personal. The best way I could say it became personal all of a sudden. I was bringing Preston home regardless, whether that home was in Lakewood or somewhere else.
No more pit bulls in the city of Lakewood. The dogs have been banned.
Yeah, the issue has definitely been a very touchy one here in Lakewood. It has sparked a heated debate between dog owners, dog lovers, and folks that are just afraid of what are known as pit bulls.
Number one, none of our police officers would stop anybody for having one of these dogs in their car alone. And if it did become an issue, if they're stopped for traffic violation or something, and it became obvious, or in a conversation it came up, they'd be given the same courtesy. Here's our law. You didn't know about it, obviously. Now you know the law. Please comply with it.
And April 17th of this year, I was doing the normal, walking him on Clifton Boulevard. The police, I could sense that he was paying attention to me, but I just kept walking. Roscoe was right next to me. He wasn't in front of me. He wasn't going crazy. He wasn't walking the leader. The leader was walking him. And the officer blew his horn to get my attention. And I said to myself, oh shit, here we go. With one foot hanging out of the door, as he's getting out, he says, you got ID. He wasn't even completely out of the car. And I said, no. And I could sense it. He was expecting a sense of aggression from me, so I can give him a reason to detain me for being disorderly. And then he says, well, what's your name? What's your last name? What's your social security number? What's your phone number? What's your address? What kind of dog is that? I said, well, he's a Boston Terrier mix. That's what Lakewood Animal Hospital told me. Now I'm nervous, because he looked like he was ready to arrest me. He says, well, we'll see about that. Calls the game warden, and I'm standing on Clifton Boulevard for about 15, 17 minutes. Ruin rush hour traffic, and everybody's looking at this black guy with locked hair with a black dog standing on Clifton Boulevard. He must have did something. You know the stereotype things that can come out.
He was walking an unmuzzled pit bull, or what the officer appeared to be was a pit bull type dog. When I arrived at the scene, I verified that fact.
If I say 30 seconds, that's too much time. That he was there to identify Roscoe as a pit bull and to tell me that I couldn't have him in the city, that I had to get rid of him.
After 2 tours of duty in Iraq and Kosovo as a Marine, Leonard Shelton of Lakewood returned from war haunted by the effects of post-traumatic stress disorder.
If I'm outside, I'm watching everybody, and that's very draining. I mean, it's totally exhausting. There was a grocery store on 117th in Clifton, and I lived on Idlewood, so it was 3 blocks. And that just goes to show you how much I didn't want to be around people. I could walk to the grocery store, but I don't want to do that. I'd rather get in my car, go where I want to go, get where I want to get, and come back home. That's how PTSD works for me. I don't like being out in public like that.
The more you avoid the things you're afraid of, the stronger the fear gets, because inadvertently you're actually rewarding yourself for avoiding the situation, because you feel a little bit better when you don't go near the things you're afraid of.
I've been living alone for quite a while, and she said it'd be good for you, you live alone, it'll help you get out of the house, because I wasn't getting out of the house. The first place he went was right under my feet. It was so funny, I mean, to have absolutely no one in the home, to have him was really good. It said Glenville Mall Terrier, and then a small part of a boxer. And I could not believe that all the stress, all the anxiety, all the frustration, all the discomfort, all the scared to go outside was all done because some had an observation and made a judgment about my dog.
911 emergency?
Yes, my son came in and told me that there's a stray pit bull that's running, I guess, between McGee and along Plover Street, a white pit bull. Doesn't seem to belong to anyone.
All right, I'll let the animal warden know.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
There was the owner of a white boxer fell asleep. His dog got out his front screen door. Police were called to the area on another call that had nothing to do with the dog. They saw the loose dog, approached, it started barking at them, and they drew their tasers, gave it a minute or two to try to calm the dog down, had called animal control. Before animal control arrived on the scene, they tasered the dog, and then animal control used the appropriate equipment, the catch pole. While the dog was down being tasered the first time, they stopped. He slipped the catch pole around its neck. The dog started to sit up. He had the proper restraint around its neck. They chose to taser again instead of use the catch pole to control. The dog flopped back down to the ground, and at that point, animal control used the catch pole to drag the dog 10 to 15 feet along the asphalt and lift it into his animal control vehicle without any support whatsoever, using just the dog's neck.
We have 2 animal control officers on our police force who very specifically spend their time dealing with animal issues. And if necessary, we'll do DNA testing on animals, as we recently did in a certain situation.
We are very gently revising that definition in this proposed ordinance. Among all the evidence the hearing officer is permitted to take, it clarifies that one piece of evidence that the hearing officer is permitted to take with respect to the composition of the dog is a blood-drawn DNA test.
As soon as they passed the ban was when we DNA tested her. And we DNA tested her because we wanted to challenge the ban. Michael Stewart said, she does kind of have the longer snout. If you DNA test her and give us the DNA test results, I'll take her off the list.
And it's much easier as the hearing officer to say, here is data, and the animal control officer might think the dog looks like a pit bull, but it just doesn't have enough for me determine that it's a pit bull.
Now, why are we using blood draw instead of cheek swab when the cheek swab, according to the wisdom panel, has more?
It's up to the folks. If they, it's what they want to take. We
new
don't tell them what to take.
This new law ordinance is now going to say you can only use the blood draw.
No, that's not what it says.
It says that the city shall accept blood draw, meaning the city may not refuse it.
But will they accept cheek swab? Because I've known people that have cheek swab that
I think
doesn't
the
come
city
up.
will, well, I'm not going to speak for the hearing officer, but the hearing officer can't accept any competent, credible evidence. And anytime you're doing a hearing in the context of what's considered an administrative process like this, with any decision that the city makes vis-a-vis an owner of property, the hearing officer has got to accept competent, credible evidence, or else the hearing officer's decision stands to be overturned by a reviewing court.
As a registered owner, I'm completely confused. I've done everything that you guys have asked. I have a letter from my vet, I have a letter from an AKC dog show judge, and I have a DNA. And I have not gotten a hearing. I have not been able to do anything. I've submitted all of my information, and I was told that now I need a blood-drawn DNA. And Kevin Butler looked at Andrea Rocco like, what is she talking about? You know, like she dropped the ball on it. What the process will be.
Over a year ago. So.
She literally walked towards me and knocked people out of the way like bowling pins to get to me and started yelling at me and said, you know, your attorney's the one who dropped the ball on this. This wasn't my fault. He told me that you no longer wanted to pursue this, which I knew wasn't true because she didn't know that I actually work for my attorney and I'm there for every single interaction.
They tried to say that I didn't swab my dog, that I used another dog. Like, that was like their biggest fight about our DNA was how do they know that it came from Macy? And I said, I'll redo it right in front of you.
So we got the DNA test done, got our results. She was 51% lab, 49% English Bulldog. We took those results down
and they laughed
to Michael Stewart, and he said, I don't have to accept this. They never had a process in place. They never had anybody really challenge them to the point where they had to do a hearing. Once they realized that we weren't going away, is when they finally took us seriously, and we requested a hearing for 3 years.
We have not had legal challenges to this law, so we haven't had to spend any legal fees on this particular piece of legislation. One side makes me out to be a villain, the other side sometimes makes me out to be their friend. But I'm not sure I'm either. I needed to make a decision for our specific community based on the state of Ohio, based on our budget situation, based on what's happening in our densely populated town.
Well, I'll tell you what, one pit bull made a huge, huge dent in one person's life, and it helped with the city of Cleveland. But Matt Zone walked outside and found that pit bull outside his office, and he brought it back in and realized that they're not bad dogs.
It was August 6, 2008. I was sitting in my district office in my ward that I represent, and I had heard what appeared to be breaks. I heard this yelp that was blood-curdling, and so I ran out of my office, and Gordon was run over by a van. He got hit right in front of the Gordon Square Arcade, hence the name Gordon Detroit. And as that was happening, he was just like, it looked like he was going into convulsions. And I put my hands on his face like this, and Gordon went, and at that point he calmed down, and I felt we've like kind of connected. Gordon's an integral part of our family, and we love him, and he's just such a good little animal. That was an emotional time for me when you first interviewed me. I had this little animal who I saw who was very scared, who started to become very dependent on us, and nursing him through a crushed back hind leg, a crushed tail, and seeing the love and the reciprocation of love that was given equal ways. It's both ways. But through that whole process, I even felt a sense of discrimination sometimes when I would be walking him down the street, that people who didn't know me as a responsible person, as a councilman, as their representative, somebody who obeys the laws, I saw the looks and the stares that I received sometimes walking the dog down the street. And I had felt sometimes when I had brought him into certain situations, whether it was a public park, where people would be guarded or scared. And I felt the discrimination towards, not necessarily towards me, but towards that animal, which was indirectly towards me. One of the things that kind of shocked me, I was unaware at the time when we took Gordon in, was we needed to get a $100,000 liability insurance rider for him. Now, this is an insurance company that we've done business with for 19 years, never filed a claim, never did anything wrong. So the one time we asked for the rider policy, he contacts us back and says, I'm sorry, our underwriter won't allow you to have a pit bull and we have to drop you. So they dropped us.
If they haven't gotten insurance or can't get insurance, perhaps that would, the hope would be, it would discourage them from having the dog. And perhaps they would choose another dog more as a pet than as an enforcer or as a weapon, or use some other weapon.
We've been examining this and looking at our policy since 2005, and there was a lot of pressure from the council back in 2005 to really ban the pit bull breed. Through our due diligence, we were determined that we had a pretty good ordinance as written. There was protection in there, but it was discriminatory in the fact that it had a certain level of expectations for specific breeds, mainly the bull breeds, that they had to have a $100,000 insurance policy, that they had to be muzzled, that they had to be chained, all of these restrictions for this one particular animal. And when I saw the very responsible act that the city of Toledo did, and I want to applaud them because for a while there, what was happening in that city was just fundamentally wrong.
Former Lucas County Warden Tom Skeldon took heat for how many dogs were put down under his leadership. Are things any different with a new warden? The number of dogs put down has been almost cut in half. 30 were adopted out last month, compared with just 12 in July 2009.
I think the rehabilitation of the Michael Vick dogs has really changed the public's perception, and we've recognized now that the dogs are victims. They were not the perpetrators.
And when you have that many national experts saying this, why do we have legislators in our area saying that? Well, because they believed a self-proclaimed expert who wasn't an expert at all.
And Gene really worked with myself and our chief of policy, John James, to look at our existing law, Toledo's law, and how can we rewrite it.
So basically, it would be on the city to show evidence that this dog is indeed a threat to the public safety.
But at the same time, our animal control warden, John Baird, was aware of the change in Toledo, and he too felt that we had an inhumane law and that we needed to get it into the 21st century.
I have to commend Chief Baird for the work that's being done to bring the city kennel along and address these animal issues in the city.
We spend a lot of time responding to a house whose dog doesn't go outside because they think there's a pit bull in there. We go back 4 or 5 times trying to find somebody at home and find out the dog's a boxer or something else. We wasted a lot of time on that one call where we've been out there still responding to the loose dogs, issuing tickets to the loose dog owners.
How many pits did you have to put down last year?
Well, again, Mr. Chairman, Councilman, what we identified as pit bulls was set around 1,200, but the more I see, even that one paper with all the different breeds.
There's 25 when we are having such a hard time not only identifying what is a pit bull, what is predominantly pit bull, but also any other breed of animals. One is even, can you identify the Latinx? Right. I was wrong.
Last night, the council voted to amend the vicious dog ordinance. It no longer lists pit bulls or any other specific breed as dangerous. News Channel 5's Justin Michaels has been following this story for us this morning. And Justin, there are now 2 classifications of dangerous dogs in Cleveland, you say?
Sit down, sit. When a dog commits a menacing act or gets outside of its pen or does something in a threatening manner, and our dog warden comes out and responds to that situation, or more than 3 times in a 12-month period, our dog warden has the ability to label that dog dangerous. If a dog commits a harm or an injury to somebody and bites somebody and creates where there's a laceration, that could be deemed a vicious act. Both of them have consequences. I'm hopeful that by the change in our Cleveland ordinance, now that there's not this vicious dog labeling based on a breed, that this program can really expand and we can do more good here in Cleveland.
Tonight, Cleveland dog owners are going to have to live by a new ordinance that involves their pets.
Now, this means, again, pit bulls are no longer automatically classified as vicious, and we do know the Cleveland APL, they have supported these changes.
Pit bulls are the 8th most popular breed in all of Ohio, and changes to Ohio's laws will soon benefit the dogs with a notorious reputation.
Ohio Bill 14 would classify a dog as being vicious, menacing, or nuisance, not by its breed, but by its actions.
If you have a dog like Dee Dee here who has never been a problem, then you don't have to worry about this new bill. But if your dog likes to chase after kids or go after the mailman, then listen up.
As far as I know, there's been a legislation to repeal what we did, I think in every General Assembly subsequent to that. So, I don't know, the last 20 years or so.
All legislation in the state of Ohio has a natural birth and a natural death. It must both be brought into being in one General Assembly, and if it doesn't pass, it dies in that same General Assembly.
House Bill number 14, Representative Sears, to amend a section of the revised code to remove pit bulls from the definition of vicious dog in state law.
Ohio's current vicious dog law is almost completely inoperable in its current form. House Bill 14 will now finally give animal agents a way to deal with potentially harmful dogs. Whether an owner has a pit bull breed, a Doberman, a Husky, or a Yorkie, a dog will be adjudicated based on its behavior, not its birth. But to bring this to a conclusion, House Bill 14 protects people by recognizing that while most dogs are a best friend a person could ever ask for, some dogs will never be that kind of dog. A lot of people have asked me that, do you own pit bulls? Does your family own pit bulls? I said, I don't even own a dog. This to me was just truly a basic fairness question that just sort of suddenly gained a lot of momentum. So whether it's people, neighborhoods, dogs, local government, I ask for your support of House Bill 14.
The House prepare and proceed to vote. 69 yeas. 29 nays. Having received the constitutional majority, the bill is hereby passed and entitled.
It's called House Bill 14, and Local 12's Rich Jaffe found it could make a big difference to thousands of animals and owners.
But under the new law, without pit bulls automatically deemed as vicious, owners of the breed no longer have to comply with liability insurance requirements.
Some in animal enforcement say the new law could cut down on all the calls they receive about pit bull sightings and instead help them focus on any vicious dog.
The good people who own these dogs, that take care of them and do the things they need to do, now will not have to go through all this.
The State House passed the measure. It's now in the Senate.
If for some reason House Bill 14 wouldn't pass, it'll get reintroduced. And every time it's been reintroduced and every time it's been discussed, the momentum gets a little bit bigger and the push gets a little bit bigger.
Message from the Senate.
Mr. Speaker, I'm directed to inform the House of Representatives that the Senate has concurred in the passage of the following bill, substitute House Bill number 14, Representative Sears and others, as a substitute bill in which the concurrence of the House is requested.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Joint Rule 16, I move that the Senate amendments to substitute House Bill 14 be taken up for immediate consideration.
You know, this is a great day today. Today we have the opportunity to finally be the last state to eliminate our discrimination of breed-specific language.
The House will prepare and proceed to vote. 67 yeas, 30 nays. The Senate amendments are therefore agreed to.
Governor John Kasich is expected to sign legislation that would no longer automatically label all pit bulls as vicious.
Of course, as you know, some dog wardens oppose the bill, saying there are too many attacks by pit bulls. One of those is former Lucas County dog warden Tom Skeldon, but he had no comment on this story.
We want to clean up the issue of breed-specific, which I think is very good. But secondly, we now add the due process language, which will protect homeowners that are good and dog owners that are good and that are responsible and that are taking care of their dogs and love their dogs. It'll protect the pit bulls that are family dogs. But it'll also put the means in for us to pull out and take care of the homeowners and the dog owners that are not responsible.
Honestly, it's such a range of emotions, from 1 minute just feeling so elated, like I mean, we've climbed Mount Everest, and we never thought we would.
But I wouldn't doubt at all that someday folks will say we don't need to have a state law that singles out a particular breed. And will that be the worst thing in the world? I'll say no.
Breed-specific legislation is, by definition, going to be both under and over-inclusive. It's going to be under-inclusive because it's going to miss huge amounts of dogs that are dangerous but aren't in the targeted breed. And it's going to be over-inclusive insofar as they're going to be beloved family pets and normal, wonderful dogs who are targeted just because they're a certain breed.
One of the things I think all people with dogs should think about is it may be American Pit Bull Terriers that are the targeted breed right now, but it could be the breed of your dog next.
We can't allow one group of dogs to become a repository for some vague fear that we have about dogs.
You need to educate yourself on that and not be subjected to fear and to the fear mongering that goes out from individuals and the sensationalism by this tabloid media and tabloid journalism that wants to over sensationalize issues.
Take a very matter-of-fact, professional, and polite approach to these legislators and city councilmen. Offer to give them the facts, offer to work with them, and if they are people who will keep an open mind, that's the best you can do.
I love the phrase, politics is not a spectator sport. And if you want to protect your dog, you better get up off your couch and get busy, because nobody else is going to protect your dog for you.
Now, if you live in a city that has a ban on pit bulls like Fairfield, that city law would still be in place unless the city decides to change it.
The city of Lima wants residents there to know that pit bulls are actually still restricted. Now, the article quoted Major Chip Prostman of the Lima Police Department as saying that the city of Lima ordinance still does list pit bulls as being vicious.
A city is very often in a mode of taking laws that the state passes and then having to adjust their own laws to fit it, and then we have to pay to enforce them. So absolutely, if the state of Ohio changed the law, the breed-specific legislation that covers the entire state right now, we cannot pass breed-neutral legislation undoing that. If the state law changed, I'm very confident that we would explore changing the Lakewood law.
Well, now to a battle over man's best friend in Lakewood.
Yeah, the city has had a ban on pit bulls since 2008, and it means Charlie must go.
Tonight, Charlie the Lakewood pit bull is no longer welcome within city limits. But the fight to change the law that bans the pit bull breed is far from over.
They are fighting to let a family keep what looks like a pit bull, even though Lakewood has a law on the books that would ban him.
Jennifer Scott says she and her family bonded with this dog named Charlie from the moment they met him at the Animal Protective League.
I'm not getting rid of my dog. I'm not letting him go.
Scott says the city of Lakewood initially gave the family permission to keep the dog after viewing a photo of Charlie.
They said you'll have to get approval from the city to adopt him.
So she did. Picture sent and written approval granted. But everything changed one day when Charlie ran away.
He got out of my yard, 100% my fault. And when I finally called them to see if somebody had turned him in, I was told that I'd been turned into the city for having a pit bull.
The mayor of Lakewood says it's a public safety issue.
And we've had our own experiences with certain dogs of this type in particular who have basically attacked humans and other dogs.
There was an appellate court ruling downstate that says a ban like the one that Lakewood has is unconstitutional, but the mayor says that Lakewood is not bound by that particular ruling, but it does give the Scott family some hope that their dog Charlie will be allowed to stay.
That's when the fun started, and I said, well, wait a minute. You guys approved this dog. You've got the email on your computer. Do you delete those? So they pulled it up, and Kurt, one of the animal wardens, pulled it up, and he goes, we approved it. And I was told, I don't really care. I've already turned you into the city. You'll have a hearing in 30 to 45 days. So we will file an appeal with the city this week, Tuesday. And then from that, I'll probably end up filing a lawsuit, and it'll just get wrapped up in the courts for a long time to come, and it'll be a colossal waste of taxpayers' money and my money.
Scott says she's received a lot of support from her neighbors, as you can see, but she says she's not afraid to move out of Lakewood to be able to keep Charlie.
The fight for a woman to keep her dog is headed to City Hall.
It has been a topic on the news, the subject of Lakewood yard signs and radio shows.
I'm with Charlie is more than a slogan.
I'm with Charlie started with Greg Murray and I kind of putting our heads together and brainstorming, how can we get this word out? How can we raise awareness for what we're trying to do? And we tossed around several ideas.
I guess I knew and we knew that if we got a lot of people together on social media, got the yard signs going, really did a coordinated effort to get it out there, to get it to the news, just to let everybody know inside Lakewood and outside Northeast Ohio that this was happening here. Once the ball really started rolling, people were just clamoring to get involved with Charlie.
And it's snowballed and it's just really taken off. I think you'd have to almost be living under a rock in the city of Lakewood right now if you didn't know who Charlie was. And signs are getting stolen left and right, so I really know it's working.
But they won't be fighting alone. Support from all over the country has poured in for hashtag I'm with Charlie.
About 50 people gathered in front of Lakewood City Hall to show their support for Charlie's owners.
Now, dozens of people gathered out on the street outside of Lakewood City Hall to protest the banning of pit bulls or any other specific breed in the city. Some passers-by hunt their horns in support of these dog lovers who say no dog should be banned simply on the way it looks.
Charlie!
Lakewood wants the owners of certain dogs to DNA test their dogs, but the city can not compel them to do so. These protesters say whether a dog is banned should be determined on a case-by-case basis and only if that dog is violent. That's the same position Charlie's owner, Jennifer Scott, is taking. She believes she had permission to keep the dog.
I have great friends and I have a lot of really great new friends, and I was in tears when I pulled up today. That was pretty amazing that everybody's so in our corner, and that made my day.
Although I am not a resident of the city of Lakewood, I'm a litigation partner at the law firm of Porter Wright, and I represent Jennifer Scott. I'm her lawyer. I'm also the lawyer for a woman named Darlene Russ, who recently challenged successfully the constitutionality of the city of Reynoldsburg's ordinances that ban pit bulls. Those laws are no different in any material respect than the laws that the city of Lakewood has on its books and enforces. On April 19th, 2017, the 5th District Court of Appeals for the state of Ohio struck down the Reynoldsburg ban on pit bulls on home rule grounds. Specifically, the 5th District ruled that the city of Reynoldsburg exceeded its authority under the Ohio Constitution by enforcing a pit bull ban that conflicts with state law. So, quite simply, the path forward for Lakewood does not have to be, and I would implore you for it not to be, I'm a litigation lawyer. I love to go into court and to litigate. It's tremendous fun for me. It's not tremendous fun for my clients. And I don't think it's tremendous fun for you either. So I would implore you to do the right thing, to step back. You don't have to take the same path as Reynoldsburg. You don't have to spend $50,000 on this. There are other ways, and I would encourage you to take them, particularly since if the ordinances you have on your books were proposed for the first time today, I don't think there would be majority support for them from those on stage. Thank you.
The hearing just ended probably about 10 minutes ago, and it's just going to be one of those things where a lot of folks say they have to keep an eye on it because there is a need, they feel, to change this legislation.
Now, according to Jennifer Scott's attorney, the pit bull ban here in Lakewood is unlawful, so they say they're going to take whatever legal action they can to make sure nobody else has to go through this.
My end game in all of this, when it's all said and done, is to be able to obviously keep my dog and to get the law changed to breed neutral. Stronger dog laws, vicious dog laws, but breed neutral.
Lakewood City Council will discuss an ordinance tonight that wouldn't just end the pit bull ban, but replace it with restrictions that some dog owners say go too far.
Some dog owners say these new restrictions are basically a ban in disguise, but the mayor disagrees, saying it's all about public safety.
We recognize that our current laws basically were challenged to be enforced, and we needed to improve the enforceability and also our ability to manage dogs.
According to the agenda for tonight's city council meeting, council will discuss ending the pit bull ban. However, they're proposing a new law that will add restrictions.
No muzzle for you.
Restrictions, Scott says, are so extensive and costly, they amount to a ban. I called several council members to get their reaction. Only one got back to me and said he's against these new regulations. Tonight's council meeting starts at 7:30 here at Lakewood City Hall.
The proposed legislation came onto the docket on the January 2nd council meeting, which was myself and my colleague, Councilman Rader's first meeting. It was proposed by the mayor. At that point, the proposal still had breed-specific language included in it.
Acknowledging that Lakewood's current dog ordinances have proven to be challenging to fully enforce, and in an effort to minimize dog aggression and attacks while holding owners accountable, with the undersigned proposed changes to our animal control ordinances, specifically chapters 505 and 506. These changes remove the current ban on certain breeds and improve expectations of responsible ownership while creating stricter consequence on owners for failure to maintain control of their dogs. One thing is clear, it may be one of the few things we all agree on tonight, is that improved animal safety requires each citizen to assume responsibility to improve their understanding of animal behavior, as well as take appropriate action when safety is threatened. We recognize that the proposed changes to this existing ordinance are the beginning of the legislative process. We four are not in full agreement regarding every component of the proposed changes and look forward to the legislative process that will follow. We ask that this proposal be referred to the appropriate City Council committee for what we believe will result in improved public safety for our community. Respectfully submitted, Sam O'Leary, John Liddon, Tom Bullock, and Mike Summers.
Thank you. We do have several folks who are signed up to speak on this issue, so we will get right into it.
On Friday, we got word that a new dog ordinance proposal was on the docket for this city council meeting. It was immediate excitement. We were driving home from a winter vacation and you should have seen us. We have poured our hearts into making this change and it was finally here. As I scrolled through the proposed ordinance, I felt like we were finally making all the positive changes we were hoping for, until I got to section 6. My excitement immediately turned to confusion and disappointment. Why would we require pit bull type dogs, American bulldogs, canary dogs, and Cane Corsos to have additional restrictions? How did this breed list come to be? What references did you review to determine this list?
While portions of the newly proposed ordinance are a huge step forward, they are overshadowed by BSL portions that are inconsiderate, insincere, unfeasible, unwarranted, and pointless. Safety is not a joke. It is not to be used as a political chess move like the one made this past Friday. This was clearly a political maneuver to be first. While someone was whipping together this proposal and without much thought so they could be first, others were coming up with a thoughtful first draft, taking this seriously. We need dog lovers and experts running our animal control. You alienated so many more people this past Friday, and you dug yourself into a bigger hole.
Most of the clients that I see, their dogs would probably be called nuisances by this ordinance that you're looking at. First off, I want to congratulate you. Big improvement on the original breed-specific legislation, but still not going far enough. First off, aggression. I keep seeing this word coming up, and aggression is not a personality trait in an animal. It's a way they behave. Okay, the other part of it is that the motivation for the animal to do something that we might call aggressive has a lot to do with learning in the animal and not to do with their breed or what they look like. We stopped the whole idea of eugenics and the way animals looked went out of vogue with people that actually had real working dogs, which we don't really have anymore, 200 years ago. And we're still bringing it up in these kind of talks. So anyhow, the other part that I'm concerned about with your new legislation is that you talked about animals that were classified as dangerous.
as somehow going to a basic obedience training program or seeing a behavior modification specialist. Well, first off, those two fields are non-regulated. I see dogs after dogs after dogs whose behavior problem is directly related to somebody they paid money to train them in really bad techniques. So just to say they're going to go out and get a certification from some trainer that could just hung up their shingle yesterday, and they're going to say that this animal somehow, because it responds to cues, is now safe in the general public, is a pipe dream. That is not how it works. Real behavior modification takes time. The clients that I see, which are very, very dedicated to their animals, they're responsible people, they wouldn't be taking them out in the general public, especially if they were considered by this legislation as a nuisance animal. I do see animals that would be considered dangerous by this group as well, and under the right conditions and the right program designed for the particular individual dog, they're no longer dangerous. So we need to really think more about putting some science into this and stop talking to law directors and lawyers and start talking to people that actually understand something about the science and something about the personality of dogs and why they do what they do. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker signed up is Jennifer Scott.
Good evening and Happy New Year. Megan George and Tristan Rader, congratulations and welcome. I stood before you last July, days after Charlie got loose. I accepted full responsibility and I took the proper steps to be sure it didn't happen again. You know, responsible ownership type things. I stood before you and I implored you to comport with the Ohio Revised Code. Imagine my elation when I heard the news. I felt like I'd won the lottery. But then I kept reading. I was shocked and sickened and saddened. It is still BSL. It is still discrimination. It is in no way, shape, or form a way to treat a well-behaved dog. I cannot fathom doing these things to my dogs. Tether, muzzle, why? Well, I'm sure some of you would like to muzzle me. It's clear that the majority wants me to continue to help put an end to discrimination. A reporter today congratulated me on my win. I'm not fighting this to win. I'm fighting for all dogs to be treated equally, to end BSL, to get laws on the books that hold owners responsible, laws that are fair and equitable for all dogs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Many have commented this is a rush to judgment. I've sat here and listened very carefully to every comment, taken notes every time for every speaker, as I did tonight, thoughtfully reflected on all that's at play here for the last 7 months. So in responding and listening to 7 months, and also recognizing the changes that have been posed by the state of Ohio, court rulings that have happened elsewhere, our own challenges to breed identification, which I certainly acknowledge here, all that compels the action tonight. Now, this is a first step. The idea that this is a rush to judgment is an inaccurate statement. This is how legislation happens here.
You know, there were some times where I thought some lines were crossed in terms of my own sensibilities on civility. I think it's important to be civil and respectful of one another, to not question each other's motives. At the same time, it, doesn't need to be a page out of Emily Post. We can be passionate and we can be, really, really forceful about what we believe at the same time. And I think we saw plenty of that.
So the next several months, we discussed how we're going to go about removing that language and actually coming to a point where all of us could agree and pass a law that no longer had breed-specific language in it. I think what else stood out was another councilman really took it upon himself to address animal cruelty issues and to make sure that those laws were more stern. I think that was a great component of the new legislation.
Yes, Vice President Anderson.
Thank you so much for that. I will follow up with the administration on that. Any reference to choke chains in the cruelty section or any other section of
I don't believe that there is.
There is. There is with respect to the tethering, but not with respect to general use.
Correct.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Vice President Anderson.
So move to eliminate choke chains from any use with dogs in Lakewood moving forward.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Obviously, we'll have discussion on that motion. Are there any council members who wish to weigh in, or?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councilman Bullock.
What our animal experts, Sharon or Kara, sorry for the familiarity, are there any circumstances that you would recommend the kinds of restraints that Councilman Anderson's motion pertains to?
This is a tricky one.
I
personally hate choke collars and prong collars, and if you're going to eliminate choke collars, I'm not sure why you wouldn't do prong collars as well. However, there are a lot of trainers who do recommend the use of those devices for the safe handling of dogs, and if when used properly, it can be argued, although it's a hard argument with me, that they can be effectively used. The problem is most people do not know how to effectively use them, and they can cause pain and damage to the animal if not used properly. I think a concern to think about is if somebody, and that's your prong collar, that's your pinch collar, that is designed to inflict pain.
What persuaded my colleagues, who may have been at one point on the other side or in the middle, really was giving a well-reasoned argument. I think you need to appeal to their sense of emotion, for sure. I mean, we're people.
And the face-to-face really is more impactful than an email or phone call, but having a sit-down conversation with a constituent or an advocate or what have you is really an effective way to get something done, I feel.
Emails are great, but we're all busy and they are too. So if you just take 15 minutes out of your day and spend some good one-on-one quality time, they'll start to really listen.
All new at 5, lawmakers in Lakewood trying to come up with a replacement after scrapping a ban on pit bulls. Some people argue a new plan is even worse.
Pit bulls are allowed back in the city, but it comes with some restrictions. Under one plan, they would have to wear a muzzle when they go out, be confined to a cage or behind a 6-foot-tall fence in their backyard. And the owners would need liability insurance.
A change of heart from Lakewood's mayor.
After considering all these issues that have been brought forward by our own animal advisory group, certainly advocacy groups, my experience here talking with citizens at a variety of different conversations across the city, I recognize that the changes should include removal of the ban because it's not practical anymore.
Mayor Mike Summers says what's also not practical are some of the regulations he was proposing for pit bulls following the removal of an all-out ban. Now some of those things he's backpedaled on, including the muzzle.
We'll now proceed to council discussion on the motion to adopt as substituted. Any council members wish to say a few words? Councilman Litton.
Thank you, Mr. President. As many of you know, this hasn't necessarily been a huge issue for me. It wasn't, when I campaigned to run for office, it wasn't, an issue that I was necessarily passionate about. It's obviously something that's come before us, and that I believe myself and all of my colleagues have taken a lot of time to really be thoughtful about how we work towards something new. My challenge all along with changing it has been that we were perhaps moving from something that was proactive in theory to something that was reactive, that we react to behaviors instead of being proactive on some level.
Eleanor Roosevelt once recounted a story of A. Philip Randolph visiting the White House in the early 1940s and to plead with the president, FDR, to institute a non-discrimination policy at the Department of Defense. And Roosevelt, after about an hour, said to him, "I agree with you. Now go make me do it." And there are issues that I think in terms of public policy which can seem so clear to us as the right thing to do, and how could it not be so? How could it be such a heavy lift? But the reality is there are many, many issues on which you could very easily coax an answer out of us on where we stand. But to get those beliefs and to get those opinions and to get those issues to become actual public policy requires activism, and sometimes 10 years worth. And so I want to thank you all for the contribution that you made to what we're passing here tonight.
We're about to vote on a big step for the city, changing our animal ordinance, our dog ordinances from one rationale to a whole different one. And I'm happy to acknowledge that the new one is a better approach. It does have one risk, though. It requires more resources and it's more difficult to implement. And so, as we've talked about a number of times, it's one thing to write a law, it's a different thing to implement a law. And to implement it will require a lot of work from the city, but also a lot of partnership with the residents.
I hear the concerns that have been expressed tonight and in advance of tonight's meeting regarding fairness. That was, of course, one of the major motivating factors for me in revisiting this law in the first place. But for me, that analysis included the logic that if any dog can bite, it's really any dog that we should be worried about. But in general, I am thrilled that we're taking this step forward tonight towards a breed-neutral approach. I think that this law also acknowledges the fact that when you treat a dog viciously, it's much more likely to behave viciously. As a result of that, we have much stronger animal cruelty protections in place as a result. And I'm very encouraged by that. And I'm also very encouraged by fundamentally the fact that this law looks at behavior and not breed. And I think that that's the goal that a lot of us in this room have been striving for all along. So again, my many, many thanks to all of you tonight for your hard work, as well as the members of the administration, Lakewood Animal Safety Welfare Advisory Board, Ms. Harvey, and many others who have played a significant role in this. Thank you. With no additional comment from council or the administration, I believe we are ready to proceed to the vote on the motion to adopt. Madam Clerk.
Anderson, Bullock, George,
Yes.
Litton,
Yes.
O'Leary,
Yes.
O'Malley,
Yes.
Rader.
Aye. Thank you. That motion passes.
The ban is done. The city of Lakewood now welcoming dogs of all breeds and ushering in a new era of regulations. Hundreds of people have been packing city council meetings to voice opinions on both sides. But it was the pit bull lovers who won the night.
I caught between some idea of life when I was too young, but half the dreams all gone. Am I still the one? In my heart you're mine. In these troubled times, seems so fascinating. Sometimes I get lost by the sounds so far, steals my heart. Now I'm thinking of all the walls inside where I used to hide and still do time to time. Darkness shines on you, no matter what you do. It seems a little sad when so much good turns bad, but sometimes I get lost by the sights so far, steals my heart. And I heart, steals my heart, steals my heart, steals my heart.
My question is it really preventing these people from getting the dogs?
Let me ask you a question in response to your question. Does the fact that we have gun laws prevent criminals from getting guns?